Hello, welcome to lesson 3. We're going to focus on the DSRP. Really excited about this lesson. It's going to bring home and unpack what you've learned from lesson 2 around systems thinking and provide a framework, not the framework, but a framework that can be leveraged to enable you to be better complex problem solvers. So let's take a really quick look on where we were, where we are, and where we're going. We're finishing up the course block on systems thinking. Lesson 1, you were focused on the system decision process. Lesson 2, systems thinking. And now we're going to unpack systems thinking with this idea of the DSRP. What are the distinctions? What are the systems? What are the relationships? And what are the perspectives as we approach different problems? And then we'll then follow this up by moving into the problem definition phase course block. So here's our agenda. We're going to do a quick review of systems thinking, talk about DSRP, go through each of those components, and then end with what are the mental models, and then share with you a software, an open source software that can be leveraged to enable you to better apply the DSRP. So what are the elements of systems thinking in DSRP? So last class we talked about systems thinking, and we unpack, well, a system can be open or closed. Systems thinking provides some kind of structure to ambiguous problems. It brings order to chaos, but within that structure there's also boundaries, and then there's different ways in which we can classify that structure in order to help us better think more systemically and provide a way to move forward and create pathways to solving complex problems. One of those ways is the DSRP, and we will go through each of these in detail. But the D represents what are the distinctions, the systems, part and a whole, relationships, some cause and effect, and perspectives, some point of view. And those can be applied to that structure. So we have systems thinking. A way to unpack and create structure around systems thinking is the DSRP method. The system, spatial orientation, visibility, and boundaries. And then let's look at the relationship. The relationship provides boundaries and understand the mathematical component, and then the perspective. Again, overlap with classification and visibility. So DSRP is a different approach to systems thinking, but generates similar outcomes and a better defined problem. So as we think about distinctions, what is a thing or what is not a thing? Those are the distinctions. For instance, we know what a 747 looks like, a large airplane, and we know what an airplane model on our desk looks like. There's distinctions. One's big, one's small. We think about systems. It's easier to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So when we think about systems, we have the whole system, then we break it apart. So does the thing have parts, or can you think of a thing as a part? So again, how do you break it down? The relationships, actions, and reactions. Is the thing related to a thing, or can you think of a thing as a relationship? So how do we relate to one another? So as we think about relationships, how do cadets relate to the Army? How does faculty relate to the subjects in which we teach? There's a relationship there. And then what about the perspectives? From the perspective of fill in the blank, think about fill in the blank from a different perspective. So even if you think about how you're viewing this recording, you're either sitting at a desk, you may be on your phone, you may be using an iPad, you may be sitting on a sofa, but each of those areas there's different perspectives and points of views in which you could consider. So the distinction rule, any idea or thing can be distinguished from the other ideas or things it is with. The systems rule, any idea or thing can be split into parts or lumped into a whole. The relationship rule, any idea or thing can relate to other things or ideas. And then perspectives. Anything or idea can be the point of view of a perspective. And then the key part about this is the mental models. And so all mental models is how you view the world. So for instance, we all have a mental model on what it's going to be like to be in the Army. We have some mental model. But then we think about what that is, we have some approximation, and then the real world takes into effect, and the real world provides feedback, and it adjusts our mental model. So think about yourselves. You are a new cadet, you may have been a cadet candidate, and then you show up and you're a fourth class cadet. You think you know what it's like to be a third class cadet until you are one. You think you know what it's like to be a second class cadet until you are one, because there's feedback that the world provides and constraints that's placed upon you, which changes that mental model. And so we all have our own mental models, but we're constantly adapting, adjusting, reinforcing, updating our mental models. And so what the systems thinking and the DSRP are providing is a lexicon that you can leverage in order to communicate ways in which you approach problems. And there's a book that calls Think Fast and Slow, or Starfish and a Spider. If you haven't heard of the book Starfish and a Spider by Ori Brothman, it's a pretty good book. So the idea is that think about a starfish or a spider. A starfish, if you cut off one of his legs, is going to grow back. It's adaptable and can move. A spider, not so much. But there's a central node in the way in which it operates. And it talks about how things move together as one in order to achieve something. But on one hand, if you look at all the math, it's complicated. On the other hand, a starfish is just kind of complex. So if we define complicated versus complex, complicated, difficult to analyze, understand, and explain, but can be decomposed to understand. Something complex can be composed as many interconnected parts within certain outcomes. Going back to the starfish example, whenever you cut off one portion of a starfish, you don't really know how it's going to grow back. It could split. You could have a starfish with like 8 legs or something. And so any idea or thing can be distinguished from other things. Why is defining what is and what is not important? Well, that's important because that provides you a way in which to categorize and bucket things and bring order to chaos. It provides a way in which to bound complex problems. So although you may not know what you're dealing with, you can find a way to bound it by creating a distinction. When you're a platoon leader, when you all graduate, you're going to go off and be platoon leaders. Have you ever been a platoon leader before? Nope. You may have led cadets, but leading cadets and leading soldiers are very different things. But you have some mental model how to do that, and you understand the difference. What is and what is not. And we think about a system. So if we think about a large system like the NASA space shuttle, there's a lot of different components. So you look at in the top right corner, the space shuttle, but then within the space shuttle, there's a lot of different parts that each part has very different functions that are critical to its operation. But the entire system is the shuttle, but you can break that shuttle down into many different parts. What are relationships? Any idea or thing can relate to other ideas. What does relationship mean in a systems context? Well, as a Black Hawk pilot myself, who's carried a lot of troops around a lot of different places and spaces, it's pretty important to understand the relationship between, for instance, where you drop off a platoon. It's kind of important. So whenever you do a plan, you have the leaders who want to be placed in one area. You have the pilots, based on safety, that may have to move them somewhere else. But there's a relationship because each action has an opposite reaction. If you put your platoon down in a space in which they don't need to be, then there's a problem because they may have to walk an extra like 20 clicks to get to their objective. And then different perspectives. So everyone has a different perspective. When you're at the top of the food chain, like the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division, you have a different perspective than someone sitting in the formation. And having been a commander myself in the 82nd, I've been the folks well behind those flags on that same field. And my perspective as one of the battalion commanders is different than the perspective of my soldiers. So your perspective matters and how you think problems are or problems are not. And then one way in which you can visually display any kind of complex problems is there's one of many different softwares, but one software that's open source that's free is called Plectica. Plectica is a great software that allows you the opportunity to really unpack and bucket things in a way so you can create almost a smattering of ideas and then start to categorize them into what is and what is not, and then make the relationship connections. So just a great software. So this concludes lesson 3. Look forward to seeing you in class. Good luck, and all systems go.